Hi, I'm Anitra. My sister once said she hoped I wouldn't survive the blizzard. And the worst part? She said it out loud, in a room full of people who laughed with her, including my mother. I brought a wedding cake, and they brought silence sharp enough to cut me out of every photo. How does a family get that good at erasing one of their own? Have you ever felt like your family was smiling while quietly pushing you out? What's your story? Drop a comment. Are you watching this at midnight or over morning coffee? And hey, tell me what city or town you're in. Let's connect. If this hits home, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that finally say the things no one wants to admit. The snow hadn't let up since I crossed the state line. It swallowed every road sign, blurred every lane marker, made everything feel like I was driving straight into a blank page. Maybe that was the point. I gripped the wheel tighter as the lodge finally came into view. Grand, glowing, wrapped in curated charm. Warm lights curled around porch columns like ribbons on a department store window. It looked like a postcard, and I wasn't even sure I'd be allowed inside. The valet asked if I was with catering. I smiled, said no, I was the bride's sister. He didn't respond, just took my keys and turned. I stepped into the entrance hall with the cake in my arms and something heavier pressing into my spine. No one looked up. No one turned. Not even my mother, who stood 20 feet away holding a glass of something pale and bubbly. It was as if I had entered a room designed to reject me on contact. I kept walking. One step, then another. The cakes box felt cold despite the layers. My boots squeaked against the polished floors. I didn't speak to anyone. No one spoke to me. Then I saw it. By the fireplace, centered, framed in brushed gold. A family portrait, one we had taken last year. Except this version didn't have me in it. I stopped breathing. The space where I'd stood was filled with blurred pine trees. They'd cropped me out. Not awkwardly, not even messily. Just cleanly, surgically, like I had never belonged in the first place. I stared at the photo and remembered the day we took it. I was wearing a navy sweater, the one Dad liked. He had adjusted my collar and said I looked strong. That photo had been in his obituary. Now it was edited, streamlined, sanitized. I placed the cake beside a tray of macarons no one would remember. 2 days ago, I had borrowed Mom's laptop to print a boarding pass. A file had been open in Photoshop. I hadn't meant to look, but the file name had stopped me. Final_no_Anitra.jpg. I closed it then. Pretended it hadn't gutted me. Thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she had forgotten to rename it. But now, seeing the result hanging above the hearth, I knew better. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional, a redesign, a deliberate erasure. I stepped back, the warmth of the room pressing against my chest like a lie too big to swallow. I adjusted my coat, even though I hadn't taken it off. My hands were steady, too steady. They hadn't forgotten me. They had deleted me. And suddenly, the cold outside made more sense than the heat inside. The hallway to the restrooms was quiet, lined with candles and artificial smiles. Laughter floated in from the dining hall. Too well-timed, too synchronized, like someone had choreographed the mood. I kept walking until I reached the farthest stall, shut the door, and leaned my head back against the cold wood. I pulled out my phone. No messages, no missed calls, not even a glad you made it from my mother. Scrolling through the noise of my home screen, I caught a notification I didn't recognize. A group thread I'd apparently been part of. Only for a second. Shauna's Dream Team. I opened it. The thread was still partially visible. Messages back and forth. Seating charts, bridesmaid fittings, playlist notes, caption suggestions for her engagement announcement. There was even a joke about which filter made the champagne glasses look more high-end. I kept reading. She doesn't fit the vibe. Let's just say the invite maxed out. I stared at the line for a long time. It didn't sting, it sliced. I scrolled up. A message had been deleted, but I had a preview still cached in my notifications. A fragment of it remained on my lock screen. If she shows up, just say the roads were blocked. She'll get it. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had planned my absence like a weather contingency. I didn't feel heat rise. I didn't feel tears. What I felt was precise, like a dial tightening. I left the stall and stared at myself in the mirror. I adjusted my lipstick, carefully. It was the one Shauna once said was too sharp for a family function. Then I walked out. I passed by the candy bar table. The sign read Shauna's Sweet Circle, every jar labeled in gold. There was no seat card with my name anywhere. No part of this night had space for me. Someone smiled at me as I walked by. I smiled back. That's how the game worked, right? Pretend. Smile. Float. Back in the main room, I drifted like smoke, past clusters of guests I used to call family. Their voices faded behind me. Their eyes slid right past me. And I thought, if this whole night was a performance, then I was done playing the extra. And if that's the role they wrote for me, this time, I'd rewrite the scene myself. I heard my name again, but this time it wasn't from someone calling me. It was from behind a door, spoken like a punchline. I had wandered toward the service hallway, chasing silence. The noise in the main room had grown unbearable, a mix of forced laughter and clinking glasses. I needed to breathe. I needed something real. The door to the prep kitchen was slightly ajar. Voices carried. "She actually showed up?" someone said. I froze. "I was hoping the storm would take her out," Shauna said, her voice smooth, amused. "We could have called it tragic and still had a peaceful night." Laughter followed. 3 distinct voices. One I recognized as Julia's. One was Hannah, her college roommate. The third, a short, familiar chuckle. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My hands were cold now, not from the weather, but from the sudden shift in gravity. They kept going. Can you imagine the photos if she'd crashed? I mean, it would have been poetic. All that effort for what? She's always been dramatic anyway. And then that chuckle again. It hit me like a slap. I knew that sound. I'd heard it at bedtime during school plays, after every scraped knee I'd ever had. It was my mother. She was in the room. She heard it. She laughed. 16 years ago, I slipped on the ice outside school. Shauna laughed, said I flailed like a cartoon. I came home bleeding, lips trembling. My mother looked up from her wine and said, "She's just dramatic, baby. Let her be." That word, dramatic, used to dismiss, to erase, to silence. Back then, I cried in the bathroom until my eyes stung. Tonight, I didn't cry. I reached for the wall beside me. It felt cold, grounding. My breath came back in slow, sharp bursts. They didn't just hope I wouldn't come. They fantasized about me dying. And when I walked through that storm, when I brought that cake, when I stood in the cold, just to be counted, they laughed. And she laughed with them. I turned away from the door. My heels echoed down the corridor. With each step, something inside me cracked and hardened. I walked past the dessert table, past the photo wall, past the bartender who didn't look up. The snow still clung to the bottom of my coat. My hair was damp with melted flurries. But it wasn't the snow that made me cold. I thought I came for peace, but I walked straight into war. That night, I didn't go home. I drove in silence until the lodge disappeared behind me like a bad signal. The frost built up on the windshield, and I let it. No wipers, no music, just the sound of rubber tires slicing through slush. I pulled into an empty parking lot behind my bookstore. The streetlights cast long shadows against the back door. Inside, the place was still. Every book spine, every handwritten note, exactly where I'd left them. This was mine. Not earned through approval, not gifted through blood. Built alone. I sat at the counter and opened my phone. My fingers hovered for a beat, but they didn't shake. The folder was ready. 3 files. 1. The voice memo of Shauna wishing I hadn't made it through the storm. Her laugh at the end still sent something slow and sick crawling down my spine. 2. The group chat screenshot. She ruins the aesthetic. Followed by, let's say the roads were blocked. She'll get it. 3. A photo of the untouched cake, still in its silver box on that polished buffet table, surrounded by strangers and silence. I opened a blank email, addressed it to Derek Gravois, his corporate one, not personal. The subject line typed itself. You should know who you're marrying. I didn't write anything in the body, just attached the files and hit send. No fanfare, no vengeance high, just oxygen, finally reaching my lungs. When people say, enough is enough, they usually whisper it. I didn't whisper it. I hit send with my whole chest. I didn't expect fireworks, or even fallout. I expected silence, maybe a storm behind closed doors. What I didn't expect was a reply. The next morning, still in my bookstore, I opened my email. There it was, a system-generated auto-response from Lockridge PR. We are evaluating public-facing risks associated with Miss Delacroix's upcoming engagement partnership. Your concerns have been noted and forwarded to Brand Integrity Compliance. It was cold, impersonal, legal, but I read it twice. Then I laughed. Not the broken laugh from the lodge. This one was sharp, tired, honest. Even a company had better boundaries than my own mother. The irony was too rich to ignore. I leaned back in my chair, the phone buzzing on the counter. Missed calls, unknown number, a voicemail I didn't play. I poured myself a coffee. No cream, no sugar. I didn't throw the first punch. I just stopped holding my breath. The call came just as I was unlocking the front door of the bookstore. My phone lit up with Derek's name. I stood still in the cold morning air. Key paused in the lock, heart holding something it didn't want to examine. "Anitra," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it wasn't defensive. It was something worse. Flat. "I ended it," he continued. "There's no wedding." I leaned against the glass and stared into my own reflection, warped by frost. "She tried to justify it," he added. "Tried to say it was just venting, that you were blowing it out of proportion." "And you?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I believed her, at first, until I heard the recording, until I saw the photo of that cake you brought and no one touched." There was more silence. Then, "I can't move forward with someone who can erase their sister like that." I didn't answer. He exhaled. "There's something else. Weeks ago, Shauna asked me to take out the line in my speech where I mentioned you. Said it might confuse the guests. I didn't get it at the time. I do now." I closed my eyes. Not because it surprised me, but because it didn't. The betrayal wasn't a slip. It was scripted. "She built a story without you," he said, "and I helped her tell it." "I don't need your guilt, Derek." "I know," he said, "but maybe I needed to say it." I ended the call before the silence turned soft. An hour later, the engagement post vanished from Shauna's Instagram. All the congratulatory comments, all the filtered smiles, gone, just a grid of designer bags and brand collaborations, like the wedding had never existed. The family group chat went quiet. No explanation, no side-taking, just digital dust settling over their curated lives. I checked my voicemail once that night. Nothing from Mom, nothing from Shauna, just a reminder from the dentist and a robocall about car insurance. When people lose control of the narrative, they often lose their voice too. I spent that evening on the balcony, wrapped in an old cardigan, phone resting on the railing. The sun dipped behind the mountains in muted gold. She tried to silence me in a speech meant to celebrate her life. I just gave her the mic back, with the volume turned up. The next time I saw them all again, I brought a voice they could no longer mute. The brunch was held at my mother's house, the same one we grew up in, now filled with muted colors, crystal pitchers, and tension tucked into every corner. The smell of cinnamon rolls and bergamot tea fought hard to disguise what we were really sitting down for: damage control. Shauna's voice was too bright. Mom's scarf was ironed to perfection. Everyone was trying too hard not to look at me. I sat at the far end of the table, flanked by an empty chair and a stack of extra napkins. Polite smiles passed over my head like steam. No one said my name, but they kept glancing at my plate as if expecting it to flip. Halfway through Marlene's toast, I reached into my coat pocket and placed my phone face up on the table. "I have something to play," I said. My voice was calm, practiced. Shauna laughed nervously. "Can it wait or—" "No." The audio filled the room like smoke. "Shauna, she doesn't fit the image. Julia, if she crashes on the way, we still have peace." And then a laugh. My mother's. The room fell into stunned stillness. A fork clinked against porcelain. Someone coughed. Marlene's wine glass trembled as she set it down. "I didn't come for your toast," I said. "I came to tell the truth." Shauna opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "It was a joke." Marlene leaned forward. "Anitra, this isn't the time." Then maybe the time was never meant for me in the first place. I looked around the table, at the relatives who'd smiled through years of imbalance, at the friends who shared photos but never memories with me. No one spoke. When I left, I didn't slam the door. I didn't run. I walked out like I belonged somewhere else. That evening, alone in the bookstore, I saw the text. Aunt June. You weren't wrong, just earlier than the rest of us. It wasn't a rallying cry, but it was real. It was enough. They finally heard me. But I'd already stopped waiting for them to listen. The letter came folded in thick ivory paper, her handwriting looped and too familiar. No return address, no stamp that told me where it came from. Just my name, alone in the center like it had always been. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at it, unopened, while the tea cooled beside me. Something in me already knew what it would say, but I read it anyway. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know the truth. It wasn't long, just 4 paragraphs and a line at the bottom that didn't resemble a signature so much as a retreat. She wrote that she had orchestrated it. The guest list, the seating chart, the fake surprise at my arrival. She had told the bridesmaids I made people uncomfortable. She'd removed my name from the vendor emails. She had done all of it because she was afraid. Afraid I'd overshadow her. Afraid I'd remind people that her story hadn't always been so curated. That she wasn't the only daughter with a voice. She called it protection. I needed to protect the aesthetic. She used that word. As if I were a scratch on a polished mirror. Then came the part that stopped my breath. Mom said it'd be easier to explain if you weren't in the frame, that people would ask why we didn't match. 16 years ago, I sat in the back row of Shauna's high school play. Our mother hadn't saved me a seat. She said it was standing room only. But later I saw the photos. There had been a row of empty chairs beside her. She didn't just exclude me. She built her comfort around my absence. I looked at the last line of the letter again, her attempt at closure. I was wrong. You didn't ruin anything. You revealed it. The weight wasn't in what she confessed. It was in the confirmation of everything I'd tried to convince myself wasn't true. I hadn't imagined the edits. I hadn't overreacted. I had been rewritten. I walked to the hallway and stood in front of the framed family photo again. The one above my mother's mantle. The one missing me. It wasn't just an edit. It was a blueprint. The next morning, I walked into the bakery, not with a list, but with one quiet request. Just one tier, vanilla, no script, no theme, no gold leaf or florals. I didn't ask for anything to match. I didn't need a message scrolled in icing or a name in calligraphy. It wasn't for anyone else, just me. This one's for a personal milestone, I told the woman behind the counter. She smiled like she understood more than I said. Maybe she did. I took the cake home in the same passenger seat where Shauna's had sat weeks before, its weight both familiar and reversed. The box was smaller, the ribbon simple, but something about it felt louder. I placed it on my kitchen table, lit a single candle. No candles for wishes, no singing. Just a soft flame in a quiet room, and the first forkful for the only person who ever stayed. Me. The silence didn't sting this time. It rested around me like a blanket. Not because no one came, but because I didn't ask them to. My whole life I brought cakes to people who never saw me. Today, I brought one to the only person who ever needed it. Me. That night I took a photo. No filters, no edits. Just the cake. Centered warm candlelight flickering behind it. I opened my social app and wrote one line. No one forgot me. I remembered. I didn't expect much, but notifications came anyway. Slow at first, then all at once. Comments, shares, reactions, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, then strangers. I needed this. Same story, different city. I've been the extra too. Hashtag after hashtag. I came anyway trended for 22 minutes before fading into the next thing. But it was long enough to remind me I was never alone. I'd just been walking the wrong direction. It wasn't revenge. It was resonance. I scrolled through the comments. I didn't feel famous. I felt real. Someone wrote, I've been the forgotten sibling too. You gave me words for it. Maybe being seen didn't mean everyone had to turn around. Maybe it meant I stopped chasing people who wouldn't look back. I turned off my phone and stepped outside. The night air was sharp but clean. Snow was falling again, slow and sure, like the world was softening. Some storms bury you. Others teach you how to stand taller in the white. There was no letter, no call, not even a glance at the bakery window as she passed by. 1 week had passed since the post, the cake, the caption, the moment I claimed myself without asking anyone to clap. The world kept moving. But something in me had shifted for good. I woke to snow, soft and silent outside the bookstore windows. I didn't rush to check messages. I didn't need to refresh anything. Silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt earned. Shauna had disappeared from social media. Her grid was wiped clean. No fiancé, no florals, no filters. A hollow glow remained, like storefront lights in a shuttered shop. Her friends had grown quieter too. I heard she was seen grocery shopping alone. No ring, no makeup, looking real. Marlene sent one email. A forward from a church bulletin with the subject, "Let's move on." I never opened the attachment. And Derek? Nothing. Not since the voicemail he left that I never listened to. 16 years ago, Shauna broke a vase during a fight and blamed me. Mom didn't even ask questions. "She's always so sensitive," she said, as if my silence was evidence. That was the day I learned it wasn't the truth that shaped the story. It was the volume. Maybe healing isn't a return. Maybe it's choosing not to knock on the same door just because you once had a key. That night, the bookstore hosted its first poetry night in months. I didn't read, I didn't plan to. I just made the coffee, dimmed the lights, and let people in. The last reader, a girl with ink-stained fingers, closed with this: "Freedom is when silence becomes strength." I didn't clap, I didn't speak. I just sat there, hands around a warm mug, listening to something that finally made room for me. They'll tell it differently, of course. I was bitter. I was dramatic. I disappeared. That's how they'll explain it to their friends, their coworkers, maybe even future partners who ask why I'm not around. But the truth is, I showed up, over and over. For birthdays I wasn't in the pictures for holidays where I brought gifts no one remembered. For a wedding where I brought the cake and they brought the knives. And when it mattered most, I stopped begging to stay. I didn't leave the family. I left the frame they forced me into. Some storms don't pass just because we wait. Sometimes we walk through them alone and come out different, quieter but stronger. I didn't get closure from them. I found it when I stopped needing their version of me to be real. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or like your truth was too inconvenient for someone else's comfort, you are not alone. You deserve space. You deserve to be heard without shrinking. What would happen if, just once, you stopped apologizing for being the version of yourself that refused to disappear? If this story made you feel something, leave a comment with the number 1 or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't like it, I'd still love to hear why. That's what real conversation looks like. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories that speak out loud what so many of us have lived quietly.